Welcome back to the margins. That thin, crumbling edge of existence where grief is a house guest who overstays its welcome. And the dead, well, let's just say they have options. Tonight, we present not one tale, but two elegant autopsies of the human condition. One whispers from beneath a bed of cold dirt, the other snarls from the shadows of your own hallway. Let's start in the graveyard, shall we? A place of peace, they say. But peace is just what the living call it when the dead stop answering back. Our first story, Keeper of Corpses, comes to us courtesy of Velix Books, penned by Cassandra O'Sullivan Sachar. Rhymes with Thatcher, but cuts like a scalpel. And voiced by the mournfully talented N.M. Brown. It follows a woman who's lost everything and finds solace among the silent. But corpses, like secrets, don't stay quiet forever. Let's dig in.
I am at peace amongst the dead. They are silent, unlike the living. No longer able to move their lips, the dead cannot fling jibes or barbs, but they talk. No, not like that. I don't speak to spirits. The dead tell me how they lived their lives, not with words, but evidence. Their soft stomachs and flabby thighs grant testament to sedentary living and cheap fast food. Dilated blood vessels, bulbous noses, and jaundiced skin spill the secrets of a heavy drinker. Stained or missing teeth and receding gums suggest a smoker, even if I can't detect the stench of nicotine seeped into their skin. And then there are the scars, marks of pain and life and vanity. Long, straight cuts to reach a heart and keep it pumping. Ropey incisions where babies were extracted from wombs. Nips and tucks behind ears and under breasts to keep age at bay. But the years march on all the same. Time stops for no one, etching itself onto skin, cracking and sagging once taut flesh. Thick hair ebbs away into wisps, eyes yellow and cloud. The residents are all old here at the nursing home. By the time they reach us, if their minds remain intact, they know they have arrived to depart. I am the keeper of corpses. The other nurses at Blackthorn Manor beckon me when death inevitably calls, and I answer. No one looks for me when they want to gossip. No one looks for me when they want to gossip, or when relatives visit to coo over a baby. Refusing to call a 90-year-old young lady or inquire about grandchildren as some others do, I remain silent, like the dead, and go about my business, providing medication and emptying bedpans. I am not paid for conversation. Unlike my coworkers, with cartoon characters on their scrubs and forced grins from ear to ear, my life is not measured in carpool lines and soccer games. These women fawn and chat. They are the ones my boss desires to flit around when prospective residents or their families tour the home. They are large and bright and loud, where I am small and dark and quiet. But where my coworkers cry and fret is where I shine. I give the dead the care they need, the respect they deserve. There is stillness in death. Old Mr. Gruber's arthritic fingers can no longer reach out and pinch my side or grasp my wrist as I remove his IV. I elevate his head onto a clean pillow and place his dentures back in his mouth before livor mortis sets in. Closing his eyes, the ones that used to glare at me as I conducted my work, I placed a towel under his chin to shut his mouth. The funeral home will prepare his body for viewing, but I take care of Mr. Gruber first, bathing him, changing his gown and sheets, combing his hair, removing his socks and tagging his right toe with his identifiers, and placing a fresh pad underneath to help guard for leakage before maneuvering the body bag around him. I had scant affection for Mr. Gruber, with his sharp tongue and searching hands, but I treat his body with respect, as I do with all the corpses I prepare. I zip the bag up over his face, my work completed. People weep constantly here, the elderly and their loved ones. The sounds of despair pervade the halls, but their deaths no longer move me. To die of old age is a blessing, when one's own body, rather than the evils of the world, is the only force that threatens. My son will never reach old or even middle age. His life stolen away at 19, more boy than man. His murderer walks free. It was self-defense, the attorney told the jury, his expensive suit and slicked back hair exuding money and authority. The deceased had a knife. It's a tragedy, but one young man's life is already gone. How does it right a wrong to destroy the life of another? An attempted mugging outside a college party, I was told. The defendant claimed my son drew a knife and asked him and his friends for their wallets, and that what happened next was in self-defense. As if two brawny fraternity boys needed protection from my quiet, sweet Angelo, with his long eyelashes and gentle ways. The defense attorney produced the knife, bagged as evidence. He said my son's fingerprints covered it, but my Angelo, my angel, was not cruel. I begged the judge to examine his spotless record, his letters of recommendation from his high school teachers, his excellent grades at the university. A good boy, he did his chores and said his prayers, back when I believed prayers had value. He was picked on as a child, teased and taunted at school. He is a good student, the teachers told me, but he does not have any friends. Watching and listening to the testimonies, I saw the boys' smirks. Angelo's life was inconsequential to them. They planted the knife in his hand. I know it. The defendant bloodied his knuckles as he bashed in my sweet son's tender head, so he was the one arrested, later released. When the ambulance arrived for Angelo, it was already too late. His faint pulse expired by the time he reached the hospital. The policewoman sat me down before she recited the news. Her heavy eyes held only a fraction of the sorrow I would feel when her strangled words emerged. "Is there anyone you can call?" she asked after my first wave of sobbing passed. As she peeked at her vacant-eyed male partner, I felt a small comfort it was a woman who told me. But there was no one who would come. I immigrated here for a better life, for opportunity. I raised my son in this country alone, his father gone, my parents dead and buried. When I arrived to identify Angelo's body, that which had grown inside my own, he was already prepared, but poorly. They had taped his eyes shut. I use moist cotton balls if the eyelids won't cooperate, and try again, so the look is more respectful. Though the nurse had wiped the blood from his bruised, sunken face, ruby specks glittered behind his ears and in the creases of his broken nose. A hasty job, one completed without enough care. "There is nothing we can do," the assistant district attorney told me after the trial. "I'm sorry, but the man who beat your son to death will walk free." But I could wait, and I have. Chad Worthington, a name that oozes wealth and privilege, was a football star in college, a beast of a man compared to my slender Angelo. As Angelo has rotted in the ground these past 18 months, Chad has graduated college and now works at a mortgage company. How I loathe knowing these details in his successful life. I have watched him, learning his habits, his routine. For months I have waited outside his workplace and followed him from a distance to the various bars he frequents. I keep to myself, ordering a single drink or a small plate of food, a chameleon blending into the background. I am small and quiet and remain unseen, wearing hats and sunglasses, wigs and jackets. At times, I wore lifts in my shoes or padding on my body, altering my size, careful not to be recognized. Tonight, I choose to be seen. By him, this awful man who took my son. I dress for Chad to notice. I know his type. A short, tight skirt and a push-up bra, a blonde wig. Heavy makeup to slough off years and transform me into another woman. Chad would never recognize me as the bereaved mother from the courtroom whose child he had slain. Sitting at the bar, I order a glass of white wine and bide my time. It doesn't take long. Of course it doesn't. I know his style, the way he comes to bars alone and preys on single women. I flirt. My skin crawls with revulsion, but I giggle and tease and allow his damp, meaty hand to linger on my thigh. Sipping my drink as he guzzles his own, I know that the time has come. "Let's go back to my place," I whisper in his ear. Chad is almost too obliging. I convince him not to take his car, for he has had far too much to drink. I slide his phone out of his pocket when he isn't looking and leave it on his bar stool. I can tell that it's new and expensive, so someone will take it far away. I have read that pinging cell phones can be traced, and I must remain undetectable. We walk the mile or so to my row home. No one notices us, a drunken couple like so many others on this warm spring night, meandering under the drooping limbs of the blossoming magnolias. It's late. The house is dark. My neighbors sleeping or out of town. Though they don't know me, I pay attention to whose mail is piling up, which cars haven't moved. Timing is everything. Despite this caution, we enter through the back door, away from street lights. Chad squeezes and grabs at me, and it is all I can do not to scream. But I have come this far. Keeping the lights dim, lest my true age reveal itself, I turn on music, something young and suggestive. "Let me get us some drinks," I say, placing a hand on his chest, allowing it to rest a moment. He sits on the couch, pulsing with anticipation. It was easy to snatch the pain pills from Mr. Gruber's room, a few from different bottles to escape notice, and easier still to crush them with a rolling pin. Glancing into the living room, I stay cautious, but Chad never thinks to check on me while I gather our drinks. I stir the powder in with a straw. Chad drinks his beer fast, and the pills, combined with the large amount of alcohol he has already imbibed, work their magic. His large frame slumps to the floor. Leaving the music on, lest he wake up and yell, I fasten his hands and feet together with zip ties and duct tape his mouth. I have planned for this. When I moved, I ensured that the house had a dirt floor in the cellar. I have strengthened my muscles, practicing for what I must do. But first, I prepare. I scrub off my makeup and remove my wig. I want him to recognize me in his final moments. I change out of my tawdry clothes and into a surgical gown and rubber gloves. Dragging him, I allow his head to bump down the stairs, not being careful. Unlike my Angelo, it won't matter if Chad sustains a concussion. Panting from the exertion of hauling his beefy physique, I prop him upright and tie him with rope to one of the metal columns. Then I wait for him to awaken, my set of knives at the ready. Does sin leave his body as I slit his throat? Does it enter my own flesh for committing this crime? It is no matter. He appears peaceful now that it's over, the terror leaving as fast as the light in his eyes extinguished. I never asked him why he did it, why he attacked my son and lied. I begin my preparations to his body, but rather than bathing and bagging him whole, I will sow his parts like seeds in my cellar. Smiling, I think back to my girlhood at the family farm, when my grandmother demonstrated how to slaughter and dress a pig. With the full weight of my rage, I swing the meat cleaver down across Chad's calf, severing it flesh and bone. Blood sprays on my gown in a crimson arc. Sweat drips down my back as I finish my work, the chopping and the planting, like Chad with the knife. Later, after I rest, I shall bag up the wig and the clothes, mine and Chad's, and drive across and out of town to various receptacles. As a nurse, I know the importance of disposing of biohazardous waste in a proper fashion, sealed and wrapped in plastic bags. I will keep my knives. They are precious to me now. Next week, I will begin to lay concrete over the dirt floor, just in case. I have researched how to do this and have purchased the materials. It feels comforting having Chad here, a reminder of my vengeance. I am the keeper of corpses.
Keeper of corpses. A gentle reminder that grief can be productive. Some plant flowers, others bury bodies. Potato, potato. It's funny how silence can scream the loudest, especially when it comes from your own basement. But don't get too cozy among the coffins. We're not done yet. Now we turn to The Tournament, a story that asks the timeless question: what if your dog sees something you don't? And what if it isn't the mailman? Written by Frederick Meyers, a name you should associate with therapy bills, and narrated by yours truly. This one invites you to a game where the rules change and the losers don't get to leave. Let's play. Somewhere downstairs, Hank was barking. Upstairs, Alan stirred in bed, his scruffy, half-grown beard catching in a tangle of blankets. His wife, Rachel, had convinced him to get the black lab a while back against his better judgment. She had a gift for talking him into things. Alan cast a sideways look toward her. She was sleeping soundly, only a tiny tuft of reddish blonde hair visible beneath the faded pink bedding. He frowned. It wasn't that he hated the dog. He had grown to love him like a son, good times outnumbering the bad. But even children could be annoying. Alan sighed and slid a pair of sweatpants over his bulging waist. This was the third night he had gotten up with the young dog. Hank refused to use the newly installed dog door in the fenced backyard, opting for the front door leading toward the street. Irritated, Alan donned a pair of slippers and walked across the bedroom, slipping out quietly and closing the door behind him. There was no sense in two people losing sleep, he thought, creeping down the carpeted stairs. The dog's barking continued unabated. He danced feverishly back and forth from the window to the door. "Quiet!" Alan hissed. He reached for the nylon leash and hooked it to the dog's collar. The bone-shaped ID tags on the collar reflected the moonlight through the window, the metal casting a pair of floating shapes on the living room wall. "All right already," Alan muttered. He reached for the front porch light switch, then thought better of it. He opted instead for the small flashlight hanging on the foyer's key rack and led Hank out into the night. Outside, the moon hung full and high. A thick, grainy curtain of clouds rolled intermittently over it as if signaling the beginning acts of a secret midnight play. Hank lunged as they neared the grass, pulling Alan sideways toward the front bushes. The dog growled menacingly, teeth on display. "What the hell?" Alan exclaimed, regaining his balance. The dog lunged again, Stop! Alan ordered, pulling back on the leash. His hands on the dog seemed to relieve Hank's stress, and he sat back with a whimper. Something rustled in the bushes next to them. Alan scowled. It was probably just Charles, the neighbor's tabby cat. The chubby red cat always displayed a look of condescension, roaming the entire neighborhood like an African lion surveying its kingdom, its glassy golden eyes always watching and judging. Hank had chased the cat once and almost caught him, causing an issue with the neighbors. Rachel had smoothed things over, but part of Alan wished Hank had caught him. The cat didn't own the neighborhood. The red photinia shrubs lining the front of the house had been Rachel's idea, the crimson, red, and green leaves reminding her of happy Christmas memories. Alan had let them grow untidy as of late. The once pretty shrubs now amounted to a thick, towering wall of vegetation, making it hard to tell where one shrub ended and the next began. He aimed the tiny gray flashlight at the bushes. Their red leaves, pretty in the daylight, now appeared much more ominous, the evening dew giving them the appearance of an open, bleeding wound. Alan shuddered. The shadows around the bushes assaulted the tiny ray of the flashlight as if allergic to its presence. The noise repeated inside the bushes, this time more muffled. Alan inched closer, the leaves now brushing against his face. Suddenly, Hank lunged again, his bark slicing through the silence. Alan staggered back, his eyes searching for what had caught the dog's attention. Standing motionless in the open doorway of the house was a large, featureless silhouette. The face of the figure, or where the face should have been, was completely shrouded in darkness, like a black hole from another universe. As Alan watched in shock, the figure lifted a long, malformed arm and slammed the door shut, leaving Alan and Hank alone outside. His adrenaline spiked. Alan dropped the leash and ran to the door. He reached for the doorknob, his heart thumping rapidly in his chest. The door was locked. "Hey!" Alan yelled, pounding on the thick painted door. His thoughts drifted upwards to Rachel, his panic rising as Hank scratched at the window a few feet away. Alan moved to the window and tried to lift it, with no luck. Squinting, he peered inside. The curtains obscured his view, the small nightlight in the nearby wall illuminating the textured white folds like a ghost in a sheet. Alan's mind raced back to Rachel, and he moved quickly, running around the house and toward the backyard. The privacy fence enclosing the rear of the property loomed large in front of him. In the low light, the 8-foot fence might have been a wall to a medieval fortress, the sporadic holes and cracks in the weathered wood resulting from an ancient battle with some unknown outcome. Above, the moon fought back the assaulting clouds, sending newly liberated light through the branches of 2 nearby maple trees and painting sinister black flames of shadow on the fence. A dark, insatiable fire looking for something combustible to consume. Alan ripped open the gate, Hank in tow. As they neared the house's back door, Hank took off, darting through the dog door into the house. "Wait!" Alan cried. He stumbled forward, his slippers out of their element, failing to find solid traction on the smooth concrete of the back porch. He could hear Hank barking, now inside. He tipped over the potted cactus on the patio, revealing the spare key he knew he'd find beneath. His hand shaking, he fumbled the key into the door lock and turned the knob. The door started to open, then stopped abruptly, catching on its chain lock. The door stood open about 5 inches. He leaned closer and peered inside. The power was out, and the house's interior now sat dark and silent. Remembering the flashlight, he maneuvered it into the small opening in the door. "Hank?" he whispered, but there was no sign of the dog. Had the commotion woke Rachel? He wondered. He feared the worst, his mind picturing her asleep in bed, a bloodthirsty killer standing over her with a large, serrated knife and inching the blade closer, claiming his latest victim. The flashlight caught movement inside. Summoning the courage, Alan leaned back and threw his full 230-pound frame into the door. The frame around the door rattled and splintered, but refused to give. Ignoring the pain in his shoulder, he leaned back and gave it another blow, finishing the job. The door exploded inward and out of view. The moon's fragmented light illuminated a few feet into the house, but stopped abruptly, as if scared of what its light might reveal. His battle with the door had broken the flashlight. Frustrated, Alan reached in and tried the light switch, to no avail. The house's interior was dark and foreboding, and a chill of hostility seemed to hang in every corner. He slid inside, using his memory to navigate along the wall and into the kitchen. He retrieved a 10-inch chef's knife from the rack on the island counter and gripped it tightly, overcoming the sweat in his palms. A noise from the living room startled him, a familiar sound he struggled to place. He used his free hand on the island's edge to get his bearings and exited the kitchen into the hall. He moved cautiously toward the sound, holding the knife in front of him. Ting, ting. A metal jingle came from the corner of the dark living room. Alan looked hard and could barely make out Hank lying quietly in his oversized plush dog bed. Ting. The 2 bone-shaped dog tags sounded again. Alan stood motionless, his pupils unable to find enough light, as another noise came from the front hall. He moved with focused intent to the center of the living room and felt on the coffee table for the red grill lighter. Taking a deep breath, he clicked it on. A tiny, insignificant flame rose from the lighter, the light it cast doing little to conquer the overpowering darkness. He whispered for Hank to follow and crept toward the new sound, carrying the lighter and knife. Every few feet, the lighter flicked out, and he relit it. His mind tormented him, expecting each new glow of the lighter to reveal an attacker in front of him, laughing as he swung an axe toward Alan's head. He inched along, 3 steps, click, then another 2. The house was silent, except for the strange noise ahead and the soft metallic jingle of the dog's tags behind him. The lighter's flame bounced off the narrow hallway walls with a sinister glow, as if participating in some ancient dark ritual. As Alan continued down the hall, the dog behind him started to change, its black form morphing from a familiar canine to something else entirely. It crept behind Alan, no longer on 4 legs, but resembling something more human. 2 thin legs lifted the entity to a full 7 feet tall. The creature stalked after Alan, closing the distance between them. Its shadowy form fluctuated as it moved, height and width changing with each step. They moved on in unison, Alan's focus on the noise ahead, the creature now only inches behind. At the end of the hall, the bathroom came into view. The water in the sink was running, and the bowl overflowed onto the floor. The sound of the water had a strange effect on Alan, the gentle flow of water resembling a babbling brook flowing through dark and quiet wood. The creature was now so close that it could have been a part of him. A noise from the basement jolted Alan back to his senses, and he recognized the sound instantly. A dog barking. Hank. The metallic dog tags jingled behind Alan, inches from his left ear. The hair on the back of his neck rose, his chest heavy, failing to find enough air. Before he could move, the creature was on him, engulfing him like a rogue wave. Alan was thrown back, his slippers betraying him again on the wet bathroom floor, his head connected with a sickening thud on the edge of the ceramic tub as blackness came. Alan woke on the bathroom floor, unsure how much time had passed. The back of his head throbbed, and a quick investigation revealed a large bleeding gash. He fumbled on the floor and found the knife and lighter. The water in the sink was still running, and the bathroom door was now closed. He stood, still groggy, and turned the faucet off. He made his way to the door and cracked it open. He could still hear Hank barking downstairs. He looked around for movement, but the hall appeared empty. I need to get to Rachel, he thought, unsure if the intruder was still in the house. He had left his cell phone on the nightstand when he took Hank out earlier, and he knew he would need to call for help. Breathing heavily, he pushed open the door and slipped back into the hall. The lighter betrayed his senses again, its orange glow reflecting off the framed family pictures on the wall, engulfing smiling faces in hellish flame. Alan crept down the hall, scanning the living room as he passed for any sign of the intruder, but found none. He hurried on to the kitchen. Once the heart of the home, the kitchen now sat utterly lifeless. The lack of power erased the familiar drones and clicks of the room, the appliances now reduced to silent witnesses. Continuing, he reached to the bottom of the stairs to the second floor and paused. A faint noise upstairs caused his heart to sink. The jingle of the dog tags. Courage overtaking fear, he bounded up the stairs, determined to reach Rachel in time. At the top of the stairs, he relit the lighter. The tags sat motionless in the center of the hallway, reflecting the light. Past them, at the end of the hallway, the door to the bedroom stood slightly ajar. Hadn't he closed it? Without hesitation, he stepped over the tags and ran to the bedroom, his trembling hands squeezing the knife. Rachel was still asleep in bed, her motionless form fully engulfed in the pink quilt. His cell phone was gone. Across the room, the door to the bathroom was closed, and he could hear water running inside. "Rachel!" Alan whispered, trying to wake her. He crept toward the bathroom door, opening a nearby blind to let in the light. A thin beam of moonlight entered the room, casting an anemic spotlight on the floor near the bathroom door. His body trembling, he crept to the bathroom door. his soggy house slippers squishing on the carpeted floor. Behind him, the pink quilt on the bed started to move in the dark. Unaware, Alan continued toward the bathroom, the knife in his hand a comforting companion. The blanket began to rise, floating above the bed as if abandoned by gravity. Beneath it, the bed was empty. The floating quilt, now 4 feet above the mattress, rose in the center. Its edges hanging down like a phantom in a sheet, it floated forward, following Alan toward the bathroom door. With all the courage he could gather, Alan took a deep breath and kicked the door in. In the bathroom, the moon's light was stronger. 2 cell phones sat, submerged in the sink, water overflowing onto the floor. The shower was running, its curtain open, empty. In front of the tub, a figure lay motionless on the floor. Alan screamed. Rachel's body was sprawled out, eyes closed, body and clothing soaked. Her once cheerful face looked pallid, any signs of life eroding rapidly. Her hands and feet were bound tightly together with a clear monofilament line, her extremities turning blue. Alan rushed to her, kneeling at her side. He used the kitchen knife to cut her hands and feet free. "Please," he said, sobbing. He checked her pulse. It felt faint but present, her right wrist bleeding. He reached for a towel, his eyes widening in horror as he caught a reflection in the bathroom mirror. The blanket floated into the room directly behind him, and Alan rose, instinctively swinging the knife. The sharp blade cut a ragged hole into the quilt's fibers. The lifeless blanket dropped to the bathroom floor, absorbing water like a giant sponge. After a moment, the blanket again began to move. Moving fast, Alan grabbed it and threw it into the tub. A slender, serpent-like creature was illuminated in the moonlight where the blanket had been. Looking closer, Alan realized that it wasn't a snake, but a human-like finger. It was 3 times longer than any finger he'd ever seen and ended abruptly at one end with a clean, lacerated cut. As he watched in disbelief, the jointed gray digit danced hypnotically on the wet floor, then slithered away. As it neared the doorway, the bedroom's darkness seemed to reach for it, the two combining. Then it was gone. Alan tiptoed to the doorway and peered into the room as the door frame overhead moaned softly. Holding his breath, Alan lifted his head. 2 large hands plunged from the darkness above, grabbing Alan by the head and lifting him off the floor. The lacerated gray digit was now reunited, the set of slimy hands squeezing, vice-like, against the side of his face. He kicked frantically, the tips of his slippers barely touching the wet floor. A small bioluminescent light appeared from the darkness above. Alan froze, mesmerized. The tiny blue light floated closer and wiggled seductively in front of him. An outline appeared behind the light, a face completely shrouded in darkness. As Alan hung suspended in the air, the shrouds surrounding the face began to peel back, layer after layer of blackness. The creature came into view as the last of the layers fell away. Its face resembled that of an anglerfish. The tiny blue light extended from an antenna on its slimy forehead, flanked on both sides by two dark, lifeless eyes. Its massive, crescent-shaped mouth was wide open, revealing rows of long, needle-sharp teeth tilted inward. A red cat's tail protruded from the side of its powerful jaws, skewered along its bottom row of teeth. Small bits of ragged fur clung throughout the creature's wet mouth. Charles the cat. The sight of it was too much for Alan's mind to bear. His chest tightened in agonizing pain. He felt suddenly dizzy. A moment later, all went black. Outside, the clouds had been victorious in their mission to envelop the moon. It began to rain large, cold drops, their rhythmic sound inducing comfort. The creature finished tying the couple up and pulled them down the stairs. The dog was a minor obstacle to overcome, but luring him to the basement had been easy enough. Overall, the first trip was a success. The bigger shadows would be most impressed. The creature hoped that the heavier one would survive the trip, or it could be penalized. No matter, there was still plenty of time left tonight for more trips to this planet, and no limit on the amount it could bring back. The creature dragged its catch through the front door and off into the night, a toothy smile appearing beneath its layered shroud. There was something about this time of year that it loved. Tournament season. The thrill of the hunt. And there you have it. A woman who made the dead her purpose, and a man who learned that not every bark is a warning. Sometimes it's a countdown. In the margins, everything has teeth. Justice, vengeance, even love. And some of them bite back. Thank you, as always, for wandering into the dark with me. If the hour feels wrong, if the shadows feel closer than usual, congratulations, you've made it to the right place. Until next time, keep your eyes open, your lights low, and your doors locked. Good night.